DynamicsCon, section how to not fail an ISV implementation, maybe. I'm your host, Andrea Riviezzo. I'm happy to have me today. I work with Andrea Consulting. I'm the Denver chapter leader, and I also have a lot of awards and been a big active member of the user group for some time. And not to brag, but I am also the second place for deadlifting and squats at my local gym in my age group, and third for bench. But watch out, soon I'll be second. And not to mention, I'm just an all-around awesome person. So thanks for being here today with me. For agenda's expectations, what you get is 20 minutes of me. You're very welcome for that. Gonna get some common sense nuggets of information. We can't really do any kind of deep dive into any one particular ISV, or for that matter, all ISVs. So just prepare yourself. If you think you're in the wrong session, that's okay. My feelings won't get hurt if you drop. They will be hurt, just so you know. But better than a bad review, I guess, or a waste of your time. So feel free to drop if this is not what you were expecting. And then also feel free to put any questions into the chat. I am going to be looking at that and answering them. All right, perfect. So let's move on. So first of all, change management is going to be huge. This is going to be what defines a project success or a failure. And I say that you're probably like, of course, change management. People have to be on board. But this is actually a very hard topic. There's a company out of Fort Collins that actually does use BC as well. Good team. Their pro side, they offer a 3-day class just on this because it is a very hard thing for people to really do. You really need support at the very top level, and you need it at the lowest level impact it. And that seems to be kind of a disconnect in most companies, is that lowest level. So the management might say, hey, we need it. And the person that actually will use it is saying, no, we don't, or vice versa. And that can cause a lot of tension in a project and make it really just drag on for a very long time. Then there has to be setting of clear communications and expectations of kind of what that project is. But at the same time, you need to have a lot of wiggle room on a project. Just because your timeline says, hey, we're going to do it in 8 weeks, probably not going to have it done in 8 weeks, but maybe set up that expectation from the get-go. And also make sure you leave a lot of time for trainers, for user acceptance and for training. I see a lot of projects go bad on this. They just can't find the time to do user acceptance training. So if your people don't know how to do it, they haven't tested it, it's not going into production. It's just going to sit and linger. So make sure that people have plenty of time to test. And that means plenty of time away from their real jobs to test this functionality. And not to mention, sometimes people just don't get along. There could be dysfunction amongst coworkers. There could be politics at play. It might not really be, is it really one team, one dream? It could be, honestly, people just don't like each other. And that's going to make a project very hard to muster. If you're a project manager and your lead BC admin are neck and neck fighting with each other, that project's probably not going to be super successful. So make sure you're looking out for that team dynamic as well. And sometimes you might not be privy to it as the upper management, but I promise you, it's there. So watch out for that. So just some of my fun stories, mapping failures. I've seen a lower level employee, the person that actually needed to validate the data, they didn't want it. So basically she kept on saying, no, we're not doing this. And what that would cause for everybody else is that not to ever get completed. So what should have taken about 2 weeks drug on for about 6.5 months. No need for that, right? And it was just because she wasn't on board. And that's management's job to make sure she's on board. Your partner or your IT admin, there's only so much they can do. But if the person that's supposed to do the work just doesn't want to do it, there's not much you can do besides get them on board. I've also seen similar things with a taxing software. People just didn't really want to do it. They didn't want to do the work. They didn't know why they were getting it. There wasn't a clear benefit for those that actually had to take on that extra work. And it just drug that project out significant time. And as a manager, yes, you could say, hey, you got to do this. You have to do this. But that doesn't mean they're going to sit there and do it. You might actually have to block out time. You might even have to sit with them and say, you're testing this right now. Or maybe better yet, communicate more of what they're actually trying to do. Like, what's the objective? That maybe it's some pain today for a reward tomorrow. And that is kind of hard for people to understand. Even myself, sometimes I'm like, oh, I have to do all this heavy lifting today, so tomorrow I can lift heavier. It's just sometimes not an easy concept. Next up, really understand your directives. You need to know your current process. And you really have to ask yourself, is that process working? Because oftentimes it might not be best practice. But you also have to be open to process changes. So I got a lot of, my last company I did this, or I've been doing it this way for like 2 years now and it works. Just because it works doesn't mean it's right, but you do really have to understand what it is that you're even doing to even begin to try to change that process. And I'm going to tell you now, there's something similar in BC and it doesn't work there. Your ISV is also not going to work. And a good example of that is an MRP. If you can't get the BC MRP to work because let's say you don't really have any processes, you don't have any procedures, you don't have stock keeping unit cards set up, you're probably going to fail at implementing an MRP system. And also map it out. If your developer is constantly changing scripts, first, they're going to hate you. And then second, you're just going to waste a lot of time. And a good example of this is I tried to implement an MRP system. The timeline for this was 8 weeks. So in 8 weeks, this should have been completed. I think it took us about 8 months. And there were several reasons for that. One, people didn't really know what the processes were at all. We also went through a lot of different people. So we kept on getting an MRP manager. He would leave, we would get a different one, and they all had different ideas of how it worked. So our developer was constantly redeveloping that script over and over again. It got kind of nasty. And even some of the processes, somebody was like, oh, we're going to make transfer orders over here, or we're going to receive into the manufacturing facility, and then we're going to transfer it here. Well, all those things need stock keeping unit cards, and we didn't have any of those. We also didn't have any idea what we were really buying, and there was a lot of complex rules, and none of those rules were in the system. So basically, we couldn't have used MRP in the system, which means that ISV was also very doomed for failure. And it doesn't mean that your processes and procedures have to be perfect. And chances are they're probably not perfect. There's always room for improvement, but you have to know what they are and you have to allow yourself to improve them. And that probably goes back to a little bit to that change management. If your people don't want to change, if they're really stuck in their ways, and they're not willing to put in that time, that effort, you're probably still going to fail. So they're kind of related. They are related. It's all a big mixing pot of skills there. But if you don't understand anything, you don't understand what your objectives are, and you don't have anything set up in your system, and you have a people problem, failure right off the gate. So that's a very important lesson. Very important lessons. Don't drag on your MRP implementations for 8 months. People don't like that. I don't know why. Thinking your partner always has you. So I hear this a lot from almost any aspect, and I will be honest, even when I wasn't a partner, I always thought that why doesn't my partner be able to help me with this? And there's several reasons your partner is probably not going to be able to just jump in at any moment and save you. First of all, they're not involved in your day-to-day. So let's just say you have an AP person quit. Your partner might be able to kind of help fill that gap, but they're not going to be able to help fill that gap. They're not your day-to-day person. They're not involved with you day to day. I would say if you had just implemented, they might be able to kind of fit gap for you, but not really. It's really incumbent upon you to have your proper processes and procedures and not rely on your partner for that part of it. The next is, I don't know if you've ever called your partner and you said, hey, I need help with charge logic. They probably have like one person that they pass you off to. And if you call and you say, hey, I need help with Lanham, also one person that they pass you off to. Not everybody knows every aspect of BC. It's a huge, huge project. You can really go very deep. So normally there's somebody that you might say, that person's a fixed asset expert, or they're really good with purchases to payables, or they're a warehousing expert. And there's a reason for that. Not one person knows everything in the system. Now imagine that not only is there a huge system, but there's a lot of attachments now to the system. So if they haven't worked with it before, or it's just not the one that they're going to recommend to you, they're probably also going to have a learning curve just like you have. Now, I would say your partner has a little bit of a benefit just because you didn't go with the tax software that person's used to working with. Doesn't mean they probably can't figure out another tax software pretty fast. They're not that wildly different, but you have to just recognize that, especially if you pick a ISV that your partner didn't recommend. So if you found one online, you're like, hey, they integrate. I think I really love them. And they're like, oh, I think you should use A or B instead. There's a reason they're saying A and B, because they know how to implement A and B. C might be a little bit of a struggle. So you're going to have to tack on timeline for that, and make sure that you understand it's just not possible for them to know every single thing about your product. Just like if you are using an internal source, they probably also just don't know everything about your products. And your timeline just might not mix. Partners have scheduled things out. So unless you said, hey, I'm going with an OCR tech in 6 months from now, be ready for me, they're probably not just going to be able to fit you in. They might, but I'm going to guess most partners have set projects. They're already doing things. You can't just kind of jam in that. Same thing with even your internal staff. If you have an internal admin, they probably already had a pretty full roster. So if you come around and you say, hey, I'm going to need this too, they're going to have to work that in. So definitely make sure that your timelines jive. Otherwise, you're going to be in a pretty bad situation. So for me, that happened with an OCR tech. First of all, I didn't actually know it was going to be that hard. So I did this when I was a system admin. I thought I knew it. My partner didn't know it at all. So right out the gate, we're already set up for failure. They've never implemented it. I've never implemented it. And my thought was, well, I can duct tape some wings on when the plane's flying, which has served me well, but it did not on this OCR project. They also didn't have time to implement my objects. Well, now it's a lot easier because of Extension Marketplace. But at that time, it's Nav. I needed somebody to download objects. I'm not a developer. I wasn't downloading my own objects. They didn't have time for me, I think, for 8 weeks just to get my objects in. It was so sad. So now I was already 8 weeks out on a project that I thought would only take me 8 weeks in general. And now I found out it was really super hard. I didn't have anyone to turn to. I had to turn to a different partner who had installed it before. And that was kind of messy just to get started. And now all of a sudden the ball is kind of going downhill. And everybody in my company was like, well, I don't think you know what you're doing. And I was like, well, I know Nav, but I wasn't expecting this to be that hard. And by the time we actually got it implemented, I had lost all my people support. So I didn't even have anybody that wanted to UAT it for me. Or once it launched live into production, people just kind of thought it didn't work just because I didn't know how to install it. Now, by the way, I can definitely install that OCR tech. So if you call me and you're like, hey, I need help with it, I've learned my lesson really hard way of how to install that. So I don't have to worry about that again. But sometimes OCRs and just ISVs in general are just going to be kind of challenging. And those timelines are just going to be a very hard thing for people to work around. So make sure that you and your partner have a timeline, that they understand the assignment, and they're able to do it. I'm not saying you can step out on your partner, but if you're convinced you need an ISV and your partner's telling you no, you can step out like I did, but that can also lead to other problems. So, yeah, guess be careful with that one. That was maybe interesting advice from me. But those were the things, at least I found when I was going through an ISV implementations. It can really make or break your product. So be careful, watch out for those things. There's a lot of setup and systems for almost every single ISV. Some ISVs really make it easy. So there's some that you can just kind of download, get the license for, and away you go. There's not much that anyone has to do. Those ones are very nice. And then there's going to be ones that no matter how hard you try, it's going to be a 6-month project. But if you can get the change management side of it down, you have your processes mapped out, and you're aligned with your partner on it, you're probably much more assured that you are going to succeed in this process than fail in this process. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Once again, I'm Andrea Riviezzo. I'm with Andrea Consulting. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You'll see me posting a lot of things about the Doug user groups, Denver chapter restarting. Make sure that you check out all the cool things that Doug is doing. They have lots of great resources that are free for end users or even partners to get in there and really learn more about the environment. So shout out to them for all of the great things that they're doing for the community, because this is an awesome community and I absolutely love it. And thank you for joining me today. And I can't wait to answer any of your questions. And thank you for joining me.
Welcome to the Q&A section. Hopefully you enjoyed the session. I realized I said day-to-day a lot. Good thing there was no shot drinking games of how often I said that wording. And then I have my lovely friend Kristen here with me today too. She can help moderate and then also answer questions if I get stuck, because she is also a very skilled partner who've installed a lot of ISVs.
All right. Well, with that introduction, let's get started. So, Andrea, tons of comments coming into the chat here that was a great session. And we have a couple questions here from Christian coming in. And the first one here is, did you experience some special pitfalls if it is not only a standard ISV implementation, but comes with customizations needed from the ISV?
Yep, those are always super fun when ISVs gets customized, especially since most people forget they've even customized that. So if you're upgrading later, that's troublesome. I would say a lot of ISVs are definitely open to customizations and getting that in. It's normally recommended to work with the ISV though over your partner. I don't, Kristen, what do you think on that? That's always like the safest bet. Most developers don't even like touching those codes, and in-house developers definitely can't touch that code.
Right. Yeah. My experience, you're not going to have a developer other than the ISV touch that code. And I think this kind of plays into the next question that we have here is, would you recommend using an ISV that doesn't meet all of your needs?
Yes, as long as it can meet most of them. I would say if you're really far off, it's like 50-50, probably not the best, but you might also not have an option. There might not be anything that's ever going to be 100%. I've worked at a company where we had to make our own custom ISV in-house just because there was no ISV out there that did what we needed to do.
Okay. So where is the best place to find ISV solutions?
I would always start with your partner first. Ask them, because as one of the points I was kind of alluding to is if you going to go rogue and you pick an ISV that your partner just can't really implement, they've never really worked with them, you're going to have probably a little bit longer curve on that. If you go out and you research your own, could they figure it out? Sure, but partner always the best. If whatever the partner is suggesting still doesn't work, the conferences are great thing, like the Doug conference is in person coming up here in a few months. That's going to be an excellent choice to find ISVs because they're all there. They got their booths. You can talk to them and try to see if one of them would fit your needs. Or just online, Google. I Google a lot.
Google, yep. All right.
Or know a guy, right?
Yeah, right. Do you recommend installing apps that you find out in the marketplace into your production environment?
Absolutely not. Don't put anything directly into production, especially an ISV. Always start in your UAT, a sandbox, a copy of your production environment, anything. Production should come after you thoroughly have tested and make sure this works within your business process.
All right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about implementing, because typically when you're implementing Business Central, you're going to be implementing that ISV solution at the same time. So how do you actually communicate with your client that you see a risk when it comes to this ISV solution?
Normally it's kind of discussed up front, I think before purchasing. At least if I was going to talk to a client and they said, hey, I'm going with this, I'd probably try to mitigate some of that risk up front. Either be like, hey, this is really hard ISV, just so you know, or you know what, try to wing it. I like to wing things. As long as the plane is moving, we're doing well, right? But if you're a little less risk taker, there's that. But I think most of the time the partners are pretty good about knowing if they can or cannot do it and saying yes or no to a customer and what the customer needs up front, so it doesn't become a hassle on the back end.
All right. But what if it does become a hassle? Christian wants to know, how do you handle that with a client?
If it's partner, customer, luckily I have a project manager, so I'll just pass it off to him, right? Somebody else's problem. But otherwise, probably just open communication. Partner is your partner. They're supposed to be there to support you, and you also there for them, I guess. Like, it should be a good, open, honest relationship. And if you don't have that, that's probably not a great partner relationship that you're in for either side of you. So, and I'm sure there's also personality conflicts, just like employees having personality conflicts. I'm sure you can get that on the partner side, but the partners are probably more used to that gamut of personalities and working with a lot of different people.
All right, perfect. So we only have time for probably one more question here. So if Andrea doesn't get your question answered, you can always jump over into the breakout room and hopefully she'll be over there afterwards to answer some of your questions. But the last question here, Andrea, and I know you touched it a little bit in the session, but you couldn't go into it too deep. From a client perspective, should my partner know how to implement and support the ISV solution I've picked for my company?
Really, if they recommended it to you, yes, they should at least have somebody on staff. It might not be your primary person on staff, but yes, typically you don't recommend an ISV unless your company, somebody at that company is trained to actually implement it and then support it. So I want to, if you customize it too heavily, yes. But otherwise, yeah, I think your partner should be able to handle and support that for you.
All right.
Did I answer that, Kristen? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from a client perspective, if an ISV is going to be part of that implementation, I may have some sort of a pre-notion that the partner should be able to help support me. I know there's a ton of ISVs out there that prefer to support their own solution as well. So just kind of knowing that up front before you start the implementation on maybe who's going to support me and different things like that is a good conversation to have as well.
Definitely. Like I had a customer recently, they have a product. I've never heard of it. It's not one of our recommended products. And so at the end of the day, the person that's going to support them is the ISV if they have questions. So even for like testing, I'm like, it's there. I've installed your the app. It's there as far as I know, but I'm not going to test this for you. And if you have questions on it, I'm not going to be able to help you with any of that. You're just going to have to go to the ISV.
Right. Right. All right, Andrea, thank you for your session. We are at time. Jason wants to give you a little luck in the chat here with your bench press goals as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I was like, guys, I'm in the 500 club now. I'm like on my gym, which I think if you're in the 500 club, you're there wherever. So I'm pretty excited for myself.
Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Andrea.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristen, for jumping on with me today. And we'll see you in the chat.